Hey folks, this is Gray here, and today we're going to do a comparison review video of the DJI 1000 versus the Delta 2 by EcoFlow. All right, folks, so DJI has stormed on the scene with a portable power station, and we're going to compare it to the EcoFlow Delta 2. If you're not familiar with the DJI, I would assume that most of you folks would be. I have mics, I have cameras, the action cameras. You may be more familiar with their drones, stuff of that nature by DJI. And now DJI has come on the scene with a portable power station. That seems to be a very powerful contender on the power station scene. The reason I chose the Delta 2 is because it's paired up nicely. They're both 1,024 kilowatt hours apiece, but that's where the differences kind of separate. There's some pros and cons to every unit, and we're going to break those down in this video. Now, in an upcoming video down the road, I will do a full review of the DJI 1000. We'll put it through its paces and testing it and all that stuff like that. So in this video, I just want to compare the two units price-wise as well as feature-wise. And some things stand out. And as always, all affiliate partnerships and links will be down in the description, as well as any discount codes if you happen to be in a market for a power station. All right, so let's get past the talking head part of this video and kind of get into the comparison review. And like I said, we'll look at them at both units and we'll kind of compare their inputs and outputs. We'll compare what they're capable of each unit, and we'll look at the price points and the biggest differences between the two. All right, so let's kind of look at the physical exterior components of these two units. This here is the DJI 1000 and of course the EcoFlow Delta 2. For size comparison, you can kind of see the DJI is a little bit bigger in regards to its size, but not by much. They both have carrying handles on front and back. This will be side comparison between the two. Outside of that, you have the control panel on the front of the EcoFlow Delta 2. And on the DJI, you have everything on the front panel. As you can see here, the rear of the Delta 2 has all of its plugs and inputs and outputs. Now, where you're going to see a difference at between these two is you got two 3-prongs, and then you have four 4-prong outlets on the Delta 2. On the DJI, we got two 3-prong outlets, AC outlets on the front of that right there. All right, so now let's go ahead and turn both of these units on. We'll go ahead and turn on the Delta 2 first. You kind of see the screen there and how the screen looks on the Delta 2. That's your power button here. And let's go ahead and turn the DJI, which your power button is going to be right up here. And press that button on there. You can hear that little beep, and the screen is going to come up. Now, I do like it's easily readable, as you can tell. Both of them have a pretty decent screen on them. The DJI, I don't know if the camera's going to show that, but the DJI does look a little bit more brighter and more easier to read than the Delta 2. All right, so let's talk about capacity. They're both basically a 1,024 watt-hour power station, but outside of that, that's where the differences will start to show. All right, so let's talk about their inputs and outputs right here, right? So you have these two USB-A's here, and you have a couple of them here, also two Type-C's there, and then you have two fast chargers on this one, so they have a total of 4 USB outputs and then 2 USB 100s. Now here's something that you want to, kind of take note of. These USB Type-C 100s are max at 100 watts versus the USB-Cs here, they max out at 140 watts. So when you need that fast charging, this is going to do a better job of powering your devices in regards to using the Type-C outputs of the two devices. Now, that being said, let's talk about charging these units. A lot of folks, when you're in an emergency situation, you want to charge these units kind of fast. And then we'll get into what they're rated at, power-wise, and how much power they can put out and handle on these AC outlets as well. So that being said, let's talk about fast charging. So the DJI has a fast charge of 1,200 watts when recharging, and you can use a 1440 watts in bypass mode, and that's running at AC at 100 to 120 volts. Now you can run this at an AC 220 to 240 volts and maintaining a recharge at 1,200 watts or 2,200 watts with bypass mode. Now the Delta 2 has a fast charging as well. It's specifically kind of metered at extreme fast is the terminology that they use in regards to the EcoFlow at 1200 watts, and that's where it stands. All right, so let's talk about their AC output, because a lot of folks are going to be using these things to run certain appliances and whatnot. So let's start with the Delta 2. Basically, it has an output of 1800 watts total, which is your continuous, a surge of 2700 watts. If you have something, let's say like a freezer, a refrigerator, an air conditioner, which when you turn it on, it has a little bit of peak that kind of pushes up and then drops back down to normalize its pull on your unit. So at the surge, it can handle up to 2700 watts. Now, in a optimal thing what you can do with the technology behind the Delta 2 is called X-Boost, which runs about 2200 watts. Now, let's talk about the DJI. DJI is quite impressive. Continuous output of the AC output is 2200 watts. And you can use a max output of 2600 watts, and this can handle a peak output of 4400 watts. So that's going to be a really big difference between these two units. The amount of power, the continuous power that you're getting out of this unit, as well as its surge. All right, so let's jump back into charging these units. So like I said, you can charge this at 1200 watts. Now, for the X-Boost and stuff like that, you're going to end up using an app to do that charging with. And with the DJI, you have this button right here, basically to go from 600 to 1200. So I like that aspect that it has a physical button that you can use outside of an app to charge the unit. And it's just easily manageable. All right, so that being said, let's kind of continue to dive into these inputs and outputs. Again, like I said, this is 140 watt max on these USB Type-Cs versus the 100 watts on the Delta 2. Let's move into the USB-A parts of these two units, because there's a big difference in these as well. And so what I mean by that is you're going to get a max output of basically 18 watts out of the Delta 2. And in the DJI, you're going to get a max output of 24 watts. So that's going to be another big difference between these two units. So as you can see, as we're moving through these, your outputs, you're gaining a lot more power from the DJI versus the Delta 2. And remember, these units are basically rated the same, 1024 watt hours. So like I said, this unit seems to be a lot more capable of more of your high drain appliances and quicker charging methods versus its outputs versus the Delta 2. Now, one thing I do want to mention is I don't have the equipment to kind of, plug these in and kind of tell you what their wattage is per channel. But I know DJI, when we do the full review, basically when they're saying 24 watts, they mean per channel. So you're getting 24 watts out of this one and 24 watts out of this one. I'm assuming that's what they mean by per channel. Before we get into the fast charging, which there's another big difference between the two in regards to fast charging, I'm going to show you something when we do that part of the video. But I also want to talk about, the battery chemistry in regards to these two units. And so what I mean by that is they're both lithium iron phosphate, which is kind of like the go-to in regards to solar power stations. The big difference between these two is the Delta 2 has 3,000 cycles. So I've explained cycles on a lot of reviews that I've done, basically charging the battery or discharging the battery from full power from 100 to 0, and then from 0 to 100. Basically, it's going to be one cycle. Now, this has 3,000 cycles before it drops down in regards to efficiency, and the DJI is at 4,000 cycles. So and to being transparent, I think it drops down to about 80% efficiency, and the DJI is going to drop down to about 70% efficiency. Now, when we talk about life of a battery, for emergency preparedness, using this something for emergencies, you're going to get 10 plus years out of either one of these units in regards to before you reach that cycle life. But you are getting 1,000 more cycles with the DJI. All right, so now that being said, we're going to charge both of these units. I've ran them both down so that they can take a fast charge. And we're going to use a dB meter in order to see the sound and how loud this is versus how loud this one is. And here's where you're going to draw a big contrast between the two different units, depending on the area that you're trying to use this in. Because let's say if you're trying to use something when you're sleeping, after a storm or whatnot happens to present itself, it's hard to sleep with a loud sound when the unit may be recharging, depending if you're using a generator or something of that nature. So to use this as a baseline, I'm going to go silent for a second and kind of give you an idea of the sound in the area that I'm in so we can get a baseline of the sound itself, and then we'll test both units. So we're going to say roughly about 32 because there's some ambient noise in the background that you guys can't hear due to my microphone's compression ratio. All right, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and plug in the EcoFlow charger directly from the grid. You'll probably hear it kick on in regards to it charging. I don't know if you heard that click or not. Basically, I've noticed that too. When you first plug it in, there'll be a couple of clicks here and there. Before the unit kicks on, you saw it pop on, and then it's going to start going up. As you can see here, right now we're at 34 watts, 42 watts, and it should climb as it receives that grid information. Now I'm going to be quiet. As you can hear, that fan is kicked on by EcoFlow. I want it to reach as high as it's going to go before we test it. And it looks like we're hanging around 1138. And to be transparent, I am using a outlet directly from the wall to kind of give you guys an idea of the grid itself, which is a 15 amp outlet, 120 volt, 15 amp, which is basically standard in most households. And it seems like we're pulling roughly about 1134. And I'm only going to be testing these on the 1200 watt mode, just to be fair. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring up the dB meter to the unit so that you can hear the difference of the two. First, we're going to start with the EcoFlow, and I'm going to go silent so that you can see the sound on the camera. So it looks like we're hitting around 55 decibels. Maybe 54. And it looks like we're still at 1138 to 1140. So between 53 and 54 decibels is what the EcoFlow is putting out. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and plug in the DJI on its fast charge mode, which is through this port right here. You're going to just kind of lift this out and plug it into this front port right here. Go ahead and plug that in. Watch the screen here, and you'll see it kick up to where it's going to be at. So let's see how high it gets off the grid, off the same basically grid that the EcoFlow has. We're almost up to 1200. But if you notice a big difference, it received grid power immediately. There was no clicking. As you can hear, there's probably no sound. We're at 1206. So basically, the inverter in this is a lot more efficient than the Delta 2. All right, so let's bring the meter back. Like I said, we'll go with the baseline. As you can see there, it's not making much noise at all, even with me talking. But let's get near the unit so you guys can see that. So as you can see from that test, the DJI is doing an extremely great job in regards to sound noise. Almost 20 decibels in regards to it, right? Because this is 34, 54, so yeah, 20, 34, 54. So that's, yeah, it's about 20 decibels different. If I get it wrong, of course, you guys can put that down in the comments. But if I remain quiet, it seems like it's dead quiet in here. And again, it's pulling at 1222. So definitely, and there's no special settings or nothing like that. There's no, I'm not using any of the technology base. I'm just using its standard charging or fast charging modes. As you saw, the EcoFlow Delta 2 hung around 1143, maybe 1145. This one's at 1224 and holding steady. Very, very steady to say. And it's extremely, extremely quiet. Now, the last question I know some folks may have in regards to these two units, basically the DJI is roughly about 13 kilograms and the Delta 2 is about 12 kilograms. So basically between 27 and 28 pounds in these units. So the weight is not very much difference, even though this seems a little bit of a larger unit when it comes to the size. But if you turn the Delta 2 around in this manner, you can kind of see it's not really a huge difference. Let me pull this camera back so that you can kind of see that a bit. There you go. You have a little bit more of a view of the two. This has a little bit more height difference on it. So this one's a little bit more compact in regards to that. But all in itself, they're roughly around in the same weight class. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is basically your DC inputs. You know, how you charge these things via, let's say, your car, solar, and whatnot. And like I said, we'll be doing a full breakdown, and I got 6 solar panels that I'll add to this thing so you can see its full capability in regards to that. And as you can see here, you have a connector right here. Basically, it states it's 11 to 60 volts at 15 amps max. So basically, that is going to be, and when you pull this down, you can kind of see that same manner. But I wanted to show you the connection there of how that looks, because the DJI uses what they call an SDC, which basically means a smart DC controller. So if you open these up here, you can kind of see, you're looking at that and you're like, Gray, what is that? So let me show you what that is. So basically all it is an interface for DJI's connector. So once you connect this to this unit here, it just plugs right in. And then you're going to notice on here, it's basically the same connector you would see other places in regards to what you see up here. And this is going to give you access to your DC output in regards to that, as well as inputs for your solar and whatnot. All right, so the top one is going to be your SDC, and then the bottom one is going to be your SDC Lite. Basically, they can handle variations of different currents, but very similar in nature. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about this connector here, because as you notice on the EcoFlow, you have that output that kind of looks just like that, like I was saying. And then you notice that down here, there's 2 barrel connectors here, a carport adapter down here, if I can pop this out, for your DC or cigarette adapter, as I call it. They call it a DC output. But then you have your 2 barrel connectors. So what this does is this gives you the capability of using the accessories to plug all that in through one port, while having a multitude of ports, which saves space. Now, some people may like that, some people may not. It's always up to preference and what someone finds that's going to be more easier for them to use. Having something like this with all the adapters, or having something specifically on here to use it all at one time if you're trying to use multiple DC outputs. So that being said, what about the output power? All right, so this is kind of, I'm going to try to get through this part as best as I possibly can. So when you use the car output power on this unit here, the single port down here, it's a 12.6 volt, 10 amp, 126 watt max. Now, when you use the barrel connectors, basically you're getting 12.6 volts at 3 amps at 38 watts max. Now, when you use the accessory outlet on here for your DC, basically, let's say if you're going to use a car adapter or something of that nature, in regards to this, you're looking at basically running this at 9 to 27 volts max with a 10 amp and a max output power of 240 watts. And that's concurrent with the SDC Lite as well. And again, remember, SDC means just smart DC. It's a variation of that. It's a DJI component with their terminology in regards to how the unit processes DC coming in and out. All right, so that being said, what about solar charging capabilities, basically DC charging, and what these units can handle for that capability? And this is going to be your car / input. Like I said, again, this is smart. Not to say this is dumb, but you know, you kind of get the difference between this is going to regulate that with this adapter. I guess I should show you that. Would that make it easier? All right, so I figured this is going to make life a little bit easier in regards to, I try to shed a little bit more light on this. So as you can see in the SDC Lite, I plugged in its adapter because it plugs in here via this SDC Lite output. Now, if I pull it out, you can see it's the same kind of connection there, and I can pop it right in. And that's going to give you that same adapter that you see down here. And then here's the other one where we're talking about where we had plugged this in. So let's say if we were going to plug this in here like that, and you're going to see that same type of plug. Again, it's the same process with solar, with your solar panel connections. Basically, that solar panel connection is going to come through here with the second variation of this, which I do have. But as you can see, there's inputs and outputs for these units. Basically, that's going to be your output there, and this is going to be your, for your charging capabilities of charging this via your vehicle. Now, that being said, EcoFlow has it, their DC charging is at 1100 watts. I've done a full review of this. If you guys ever want to, you guys can check that out, of the Delta 2. So they say 1100 watts. Now, of course, that's in perfect conditions in regards to sunshine and all that stuff like that. If you're using solar, if you're using your vehicle, depending on what your vehicle is rated from that adapter to the unit. There's, like I said, there's a lot of give and play depending on that, because there's, you can get lots of variations. Anyway, so that being said, you're basically with this here, you're going to get with 400 watts on each of one of these here. So you get a total of 800 watts at 8 amps. Now, basically, it can range anywhere from 32 to 58.4 volts in regards to how many volts you can put into this versus the EcoFlow. Now, like I said, so you combine those and you're putting 800 watts into the unit. This is, 1100 watts. So there is a variation between the two in regards to that. Now, how efficient the two are, that's going to be the deciding factor in regards to that. So just to kind of give you a breakdown, hopefully, I know it's a lot of information to take in. And what I suggest for you folks to do is to follow with other secondary videos, as well as clicking on the links in the description so you can get a full breakdown and watch some of their more informational, descriptions and information on their websites. That'll give you a little bit more of a follow-up outside of just this video. Now, that being said, let's talk about price of these two units as of when this video is dropping. All right, so according to their websites, okay, this is directly from EcoFlow's website and DJI's website. So I'll throw it up on the screen. Currently, the EcoFlow Delta 2 is basically at $1,000, and the DJI is at $700, basically $999.99 versus $699.99. But I'm gonna round up, $700 and $1,000. What do you think is the better option for you, the individual? Some of the things that I went over in regards to this kind of comparison of the two units, what do you think is going to be most effective for you? That's up to personal preference. I do like the streamlined version of this. I like how quiet it is. And I like how having these adapters, these SDC adapters, kind of make more room for the unit, and how it's a little bit more square. I don't know if you can see how the height difference of the unit is. I do like that. Now, that being said, the EcoFlow does have more AC outlets on the back of it. Now, it only has the three-prong outlets and 4 2-prong outlets. So depending on what you're trying to use it for, you might run into that issue. But honestly, at 1,024 watt hours, you probably don't want to go with 1 or 2 more heavy drain appliances and stuff like that. When it comes to more lights and stuff like that, I mean, you could always hook up an additional adapter to something like this and get a couple more outlets. But again, you'll be draining these batteries a lot quicker. But $700 versus $1,000 according to their websites. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and let's bounce back to me. All right, so what do you guys think? What do you think of the EcoFlow Delta 2 versus the DJI 1000 in this comparison video? Please put that down in the comments. Always love to hear your guys' feedback in regards to these products, in regards to how they apply to your emergency preparedness kit, and so on and so forth. That being said, DJI has impressed me so far, but we're going to put it through its paces in a full breakdown review video, and we'll push it to its limits and see how well it does under pressure. As always, folks, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video. If you got any value at all out of the video, hitting that thumbs up button is truly appreciated, as well as sharing this video out to people that might find this informative, as well as if you're new here, take a chance and subscribe and check out the rest of the channel. As always, folks, remember, you are not alone. This is GreyMan. I'm out. I'll see you guys in a rebound. God bless every single one of you amazing people out there.